Hello and welcome to GryphonArt on a day when I've been experimenting with some Tim Holtz Distress Inks in order to create these little Easter chicks which I want to use to embellish my gift boxes this year. Now I am new to Distress Inks, so this demonstration is really intended for people like me who are not always sure where to start when it comes to using colour. Now I do just want to mention that a lot of people were suggesting that if you're going to be using a lot of water with Distress Inks, it is advisable to use a watercolour paper. So I have cut my little chick out of a reasonable weight watercolour card, which is in this case £140 or 300 GSM. And interestingly, I'm hoping you're going to be able to pick it up on camera. Once it's gone through the die cutter, the paper is further compressed, and so you go from this slightly textured finish to a very smooth surface. So let's just introduce you to our die cut to start with, and I'm actually using the Cottage Cutz Little Spring Chicks 3x3 die cutter, which is product code CC3x3-098, but I will put this information in the description area for you, so don't worry too much about that. And that die cutter just comes in one of these thin metal forms, and you can see our little chick there. So I'm just going to move most of these chicks out of view. I'll just leave one behind so that you've got something to reference as we're building up our colour. Now I have already cut out my die cuts, and I am going to be using 2 die cuts per finished chick for a couple of reasons. The first one is that this watercolour paper is actually quite thin, and because we're only dealing with a very small area, there is a tendency for it to curl a bit when the colour is applied. So by layering them up, I end up with something much more substantial, and that does counteract that problem a little. Now, the other thing is the design of this die cutter, and I hope you can see this here. It's designed in such a way that the holes are, the eyes are actually holes rather than card. And even if, as is the case with this one, you manage to cut it in such a way that the holes remain intact, so they don't remove themselves from your card, I still found them quite difficult to paint. So layering them up, you will see in a minute how layering them up does resolve that issue. So let's just begin with the eyes. And having managed to die cut some of my die cuts where the eyes have remained intact, all I've done to start with is put a little bit of tape, in this case it's double-sided tape, across the back of those eyes to stop them from falling out. And at this point, all I'm going to do is just use a permanent marker. In this case, it's a Sharpie, and a black marker because I want my eyes to be black. And don't be horrified; it doesn't look good, but I'm just going to fill in those eyes with black marker. I can then I tend to use a combination of double-sided tape and PVA glue, but you can use whatever adhesion you choose. I can then layer those up, and that then means that I've got some little black eyes, and I think hopefully you'll be able to see the difference if I show you one that I created earlier. So that's all I do for the eyes. So we're now ready to start and look at some colour, and I'm going to be using 3 of the Tim Holtz Distress Inks for this. And it doesn't really matter whether you're using the ink pads or the marker pens, either will work. I'm going to be using mustard seed, fossilized amber and spiced marmalade for this particular project. And I will put a note of that in the description area for you. But we're going to be starting with the mustard seed. So in addition to the ink, I also am going to be using a Tim Holtz water brush and an ordinary watercolouring brush, and I normally keep some water available as well for when the water brush doesn't release quite enough water for me. And the only other thing I have available is a little bit of kitchen towel, that sort of thing, to just clean off my brush as I need to apply a different colour. So I'm just going to put some ink on one of these little dishes. You can use a craft mat, lots of people do. I quite like these little dishes because I can see what the colour is. So that's the mustard seed. And this is a really quick process. I tend to start my water brush off with a little bit of water. Don't want to be too dark at this time. You can always go over. And because I know that the wings are going to be quite dark, I normally start there. I can add a little bit more water if my brush isn't releasing enough for me. You don't want it to be too pale. You're aiming for a sort of pale yellow colour. And you're just going over the whole thing, including the legs at this stage. And you could do some of the edges as well. I'll sort of rush through this because I don't want to waste loads of your time getting it absolutely perfect. This is about you seeing the method more than anything else. So this area around the breastbone here, I try and keep a little bit more pale because if you can see there, it's just a little pale area. And this will need, you know, we're applying quite a bit of water at this stage because it's basically a wash. And you will need to let it dry quite thoroughly. Perhaps apply a little bit more around the beak area. So that's just your first wash. If we look at our original chick here, just clean off that brush a bit. If we look at our original chick here, you can perhaps begin to see the dark areas. This one has got quite a dark face. Some of them are lighter. It's just a matter of playing around with what you like, really. So that's stage one. So we just need to let that dry off. I have got one that I created earlier. You can see he's dried up fairly dark. It is that sort of lemon colour. So we can move on swiftly. And what I'll do, I've put him out of view, sorry about that. So I can now swap from my mustard seed, finished with that for the time being, and return to another colour, which in this case is fossilized amber. And this forms the main colour really for the chick. If you wanted a slightly more yellow chick, you might be able to find a colour that was more yellow rather than brown, and that would give you a different colour chick as well. So I just tend to start with the wings because I know that they are fairly dark. So again, I just start this off with a little bit of extra water. I clean that properly. Just going to twist that round in case I didn't get it quite clean. So, and I just start with the tops of these wings. That's quite pale actually. And onto the shoulder, and also underneath the chin. That can be quite dark here. And down by this breastbone here. So I start quite dark and then just blend down, and I do leave some of the yellow on the tips of the wings visible. So just blending that down, and at this stage you don't want to be too dark. Just start in the areas that you know you want dark, blend the rest down, and you can then go back and add more depth of colour later. So I can add a bit more dark there. I'm also going to go underneath this line a little bit where there might be a bit of shadow, and again place some darkness round the edge here. and just blend that in a little bit and leave some light colours as well. You know, these are not all going to be the same, these chicks, so I'm just going to go over this area a little bit, and I will come back to him. So we're keeping it quite light. I'm going to move on to the face now. I know that I like the top of the head here to be quite dark, so I can start there, and I know that the colour will start to fade, and I can bring that colour down the side of the face here and blend it in to the side of this beak. I don't want really to go into the area where the eyes are too much, because I'm going to keep that lighter, as you can see from this little original. I'll move him down there a bit. So I'm now going to move around to the other side, the other wing. I'll try and keep him upright for you. So again, it's just the tops of the wings I start with, because I can put that depth of colour on, and it gives me a chance then to spread it out more lightly onto the rest of the wing. And just onto the shoulders can be dark, and definitely underneath the chin for a little bit of shadow there. Now I do like to spread this and blend it down, so I've got some of this shading, but I'm keeping this area to the left of this breastbone quite clear, and I keep the left side, I have to think about my right and left there for a minute, of the chick lighter than the right. And again, this is just messing around in some respects, so you know, you can experiment yourself and find out what you prefer. So I'm going to work a little bit on this side of his face, and I can again start at the top. Just a little bit more water there actually. So I can again start at the top, because I don't mind that being dark there, and bring it round the edges of my chick. I'm losing him a bit. And then I can just bring in some of that colour, again avoiding the area of the eyes, only with light shading at this stage. And we'll build that colour up a bit down there. So that's really the first. Let me just get a dish for you actually. Set of colour, and that's what we're then going to build on. And because we've been working fairly slowly, you can return to the place where you started and just go over, because it's dry enough by this stage. So we'll then build up the colour so that we deepen it in areas where we feel we need a bit more definition. So I'll get on and work on that now. So again, starting with my wings, I just want it to be a bit darker in this area here, under the shoulder and under the chin. And it depends, the technique you use can either create a smooth finish, or you can sort of use the tip of the brush to create little lines that are not necessarily blended. It is up to you. You know, you can create little dark patches maybe. And just remember, the thing to remember is that this will dry darker, so just be aware of that. Go under here. Work on the head here. And there's got these tiny little things here. Smooth that out a bit. That I like to put a little bit of colour into, because it's quite a nice little definition there. Clean my brush a bit just to blend that a little bit more. And that's the thing, you can always add a little bit more water if you feel you've applied a little bit too much colour. And I'm just now going to go around these edges as well, just to give a bit more definition. And I do all the edges, because whatever you're applying this to, you are going to get that view, and so you really don't want this look here. It's nice to have solid colour on view there. So I won't do all of that on camera, because you know what I'm trying to tell you. So we'll just put a little bit more. And I do quite like to sort of come around and into this section here, and then give him almost like a little cheek here as well. So make some of these areas a bit darker. Now I'm back on this side, which again is slightly lighter than the right hand side, but the wings are still a bit dark, and under this chin. And then I can just gently build up that colour a little. Mainly it's at the bottom here. And I do build up a little bit under here. But I do like to just leave that whitish bit on the breastplate. Okay, so he's beginning to take some character on board now. So I'm going to actually leave that there. I can always come back later if I feel once he's dried I want to add any more definition, but for the time being I'm just going to let him dry out, and I can make my choice at that stage. So that doesn't mean I can't continue painting, because we've got the legs to do and the beak to do, so I'm going to move on to that next. Cleaning my brush off to start with, otherwise I'll forget. So for the legs and for the beak on the whole, I'm going to keep my fossilized amber ink available, because I will return to that, but we're going to be using this spiced marmalade colour for the legs and the beak. Fairly straightforward. So just put some of that in my pot. And I want quite a strong colour for my legs, but a lighter colour for the beak. I'll try and move this so I can work more easily. So I'm going to start with the legs. It's just very straightforward, this. And it depends how dark that you want them, really. I like mine to be quite orange. And again, you do the sides of these. You can see this is actually quite a rich, deep colour. Now for his beak, I do want to have just a light, I want a distinction of colour difference between the face and the beak to start with, and there is going to be a layering process. So I don't want it too wet, but I don't want it too strong a colour either. So I'm just going to lightly. And that doesn't look like anything in the way of orange at the moment, but when it dries it will be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to now leave that to thoroughly dry out, because I want to layer up the colour on that beak, and I need it to be dry in order for it to do that. So I'll come back to you in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm now happy that he has dried off, and I'm going to swap to a conventional paintbrush now, because I want to apply quite a solid colour to half of this beak. If I can show you, just one half. And so I don't want to have a continual supply of water, which my water brush will give me. So a conventional paintbrush works better for me in this instance, in my opinion. So I'm just going to use my fossilized amber again for this, and I have only got a limited number of colors of distress ink. So if you've got a really dark brown, you know, you might be able to apply it with a little bit more water to the same effect. So I'm just going to make sure that's just a single tip first of all, and more or less divide that beak in half. It's just to give it that three-dimensional look of being pointed, really. I can see whilst I'm on camera a bit more. So that's really all I'm doing. Now you could make that darker if you wanted. It's a matter of choice and opinion. And I'll probably go in, I'm not going to do it on camera because I'm guessing you've got the idea of it now. I'll probably go in and just darken him a little around the top here. In fact, whilst I'm speaking, I could do that. Just put a little bit of perhaps better definition in here, and maybe in the side here a bit as well. But this is now very much just sort of playing around. So that's basically how I've built that colour on that chick. I'm not an expert, I'm very new to colour myself. This was really just because I want to use these chicks in one of my gift box tutorials, and I wanted to make this method available to anybody who wanted to reproduce those gift boxes. I'm hoping that it's provided you a foundation to work from and that it's been of some use, and I thank you very much for your time.